Welcome to New in the 90s. There was a show called Now in the 90s, or a channel called Now in the 90s, but they have called it quits after a couple years. Say they're not making enough money. Well, I'm not about making money. I'm about wasting my time. So, April of 1994, I'm not going to do it weekly. I'm going to do 2 episodes a month. I'm going to break it down. SNES games, Genesis games, Game Boy games, and Game Gear games. That is what I'm going to look at. Sega and Nintendo. And I might regret that after looking at the upcoming April schedule. A lot of the dates, there are no dates, it just says April. So I'm just going to break it into 2 groups, kind of divide it up. Let's start with the Super NES. Balls is a 2-player, 2.5D action fighting game for the Sega Mega Drive Genesis, SNES, and the 3DO. It was developed by PF Magic and published by Accolade in 1994. The 3DO version was released as a director's cut in 1995. Balls offered 3 difficulty levels over a total of 21 matches. Its distinguishing quality was that each of the characters was composed completely of spheres, granting a pseudo 3D look. This game has never really caught my attention, even back when it came out in 1994. I wasn't a huge gamer, but Balls did not catch my attention, never played it. We'll look at the I'm also going to look at the values, so
Oi!
Ah!
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 Ray! Oi!
Ah!
Oi!
Ah!
Oi!
Ah!
Oi!
Ah! Ah!
Champion World Class Soccer is a football soccer video game released on the Genesis and Super NES in 1993 and 1994, developed by Park Place Productions and published by Acclaim Entertainment. Never played it. Let's look at the prices for it. Dream TV is an action video game for the Super NES, where the player has to guide two youngsters through a nightmarish land of evil television shows. Using a similar plot to the campy movie Stay Tuned and Crystal Dynamics video game Gex, the player has to escape by defeating stereotypical television villains and finding pieces of a puzzle. The game features complex labyrinths. The reviews look pretty bad for this. What's on Wikipedia? 20 and 30%. So, Dream TV doesn't look too good. Here's the prices for Dream TV. Again, we're looking at Super NES games at the moment. Eye of the Beholder is a role-playing video game for personal computers and video game consoles developed by Westwood Associates. It was published by Strategic Simulations Incorporated in 1991 for the MS-DOS operating system and later ported to the Amiga, Sega CD, and the Super NES. The Sega CD versions features a soundtrack composed by Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima. A port to the Atari Lynx handheld was developed by New Effects in 1993 but was not released, so it's probably out there in a ROM form, I'm guessing. In 2002, an adaptation of the same name was developed by Pronto Games for the Game Boy Advance. The game has a couple sequels. The third one was not developed by the same studio. This is the kind of game I might have liked back in the day on the Super NES. I didn't play a lot of Super NES games. We didn't own a Super NES. We went from the NES, Atari 2600, to the NES, to the Sega Genesis. And we didn't have a lot of games. We had hockey, me and my brother played, and Road Rash, and Mortal Kombat 2, I believe, and a few other games. We weren't huge into gaming at this time. We were playing sports and doing other stuff. Video games were kind of falling by the wayside at this time. I would later get back into them a little bit more with the PlayStation, and then, yeah, that was it for my video gaming. But Eye of the Beholder is something that I probably would have liked, so it looks like the reviews, what's listed on Wikipedia, mid-90s for some of the versions, and 6s and 7s for other versions. So it looks like the SNES version is the weakest experience, but still, if that's all you played, it was probably a half-decent port, and if that was your cup of tea, you probably enjoyed it. Also in April 1994 on the SNES, Fatal Fury 2, a 1992 fighting game released by SNK for the Neo Geo arcade and home platforms, later ported to several other home systems. It is the sequel to Fatal Fury King of Fighters, 1991, and the second game in the Fatal Fury franchise. Its updated version, Fatal Fury Special, was released in 1993. The game introduced Kim Kafwan, the first Taekwondo and first Korean character in fighting games, and Mai Shiranui, one of SNK's mascots, their primary sex symbol, and one of the most well-known female video game characters. I've never heard of her. Both of them went on to become mainstays in Fatal Fury games as well as the King of Fighters series. Reviews again vary from system to system for this game, but not that widely. Most are in the 70 to 90% version. And again, the SNES looks like it has the weakest reviews between the Genesis, Neo Geo, and the Super NES. So, looking at the prices, Joe and Mack 2, Lost in the Tropics. Known in PAL regions as Joe and Mack 3, Lost in the Tropics, is a 1994 Super NES game and sequel to Joe and Mack. It is follow-up to Congo's Caper, the second game in the series. Looks like this game only came out on the SNES and got pretty good reviews. Joe and Mack. The King of Dragons. The King of Dragons is a 1991 beat-em-up game by Capcom that follows players as they control characters through the kingdom of Malice to defeat monsters led by the dragon Gildas. It features a level advancement system allowing character attributes to be upgraded as players progress through the game. The game's music was composed by Yoko Shimomura. The King of Dragons was ported to the Super NES in 1994. An emulated version of the game has been released as part of a number of Capcom classic collections over the years. Kinda looks okay. I'm not a huge beat-em-up fan. There are a couple I like. And yeah, this one looks okay, I guess. Knights of the Round is an arcade game released by Capcom in 1991, a side-scrolling beat-em-up based loosely on the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The game features an action role-playing video game-like level advancement system, with fighters automatically being upgraded to the new weapons and armor as they advance through the game. So this is a second Capcom arcade beat-em-up type game released again in April 1994 on the Super NES. Another arcade game which was pretty much just ported to the Super NES. Lots of reviews listed. The Australian magazine Hyper gave it 30%, while a couple UK mags gave it 50%. Nintendo Power gave it 67%, and Game Players gave it an 86%. So yeah, that's from 30 to 86% for the game. I guess you have to play it and make up your own mind. Looking at the prices for Knights of the Round. Liberty or Death is a turn-based strategy video game for the NEC PC 9801, MS-DOS, Super NES, and Sega Genesis, released by Koei in 1993. It is part of Koei's historical simulation series. Looks like it got lots of historical detail in it and is set during the American Civil War. The few reviews that are on Wikipedia make the game sound like it's kind of average. But if you like kind of turn-based strategy, historical stuff, this would be up your alley. Let's look at the prices for Liberty or Death. Next, on the SNES in April 1994, is Pinball Dreams, a pinball simulation video game developed by Digital Illusions and originally released for the Amiga in 1992. It spawned several sequels, including Pinball Fantasies and Pinball Illusions. The MS-DOS port was digitally released by Rebellion Developments, along with its sequel, Pinball Mania, in 2011 on GoodOldGames.com. With support for Microsoft Windows, it received an OS X build on April 2013 and a Linux build on 2014. So it's a rather popular pinball game that keeps getting updated sort of ports over the decades. I like a good pinball game, so this is probably something worth trying on the SNES. And there was another game listed for April on the SNES, but after reading it, it sounds like it came out in arcades and then in December on the SNES. So I'm not going to look at that. But those are half of the SNES games for April 1994. Next, we'll look at the Genesis games. Dragon Chaser Kev here to talk about some games. Sega Genesis games. Okay, the Sega Genesis games for April 1994. Double Dribble, the Playoff Edition, originally released in Japan as Hyperdunk, the Playoff Edition, and later in Europe as Hyperdunk, is a basketball video game developed and published by Konami for the Sega Genesis. It is a follow-up to Double Dribble, originally released for the arcade in 1986 and various home computer systems and consoles. Seemed that it kind of had middle-of-the-road reviews.
Double Dribble! First round!
Next, we have Grindstormer, 1993 vertically scrolling shooter arcade video game originally developed and published by Toa Plan in Japan and North America. It is considered to be the spiritual successor to Slap Fight. Based around a video game within a video game concept, players assume the role of a young secret agent assigned by the government taking control of the NA-00 space fighter craft in attempt to defeat the titular virtual reality simulator, rescue the abducted players who lost against it, and unveil its true purpose. Seems that Grindstormer had mid to good reviews. NBA Action 94. This game doesn't have a Wikipedia page, and I'm not going to look it up. It's a basketball game. NBA Action 94.
He hits the three!
And we have Pete Sampras Tennis, a sports video game developed by Zeppelin Games and published by Codemasters for the Sega Genesis and the Game Gear in 1994. It was followed by Sampras Tennis 96 for the Genesis and Pete Sampras Tennis 97. Looks like it had decent reviews, mostly.
Sampras to serve. Quiet please, thank you. Love, 15. Quiet, please. Thank you.
RBI Baseball 94 has no Wikipedia page. It's a baseball game. RBI Baseball, if memory serves, they're pretty decent games. I'm not too sure. It's a baseball game. We'll look at the prices for these games as well.
RBI 94. Play ball. Fly ball to first. You're out. Strike.
So many sports games. How about something different? Trivia game. Jeopardy! Sports Edition. Like, there isn't enough sports games on the Genesis. Seems like there's always more sports games to come, including Jeopardy! Sports Edition. It's a sports-themed Jeopardy game. I don't know who bought this, but apparently there was a market. They made it. Somebody must have bought it. Let's look at the prices. I can't imagine it's too valuable.
Jeopardy!
Sorry? Sorry? You are correct.
And since there are not very many Sega Genesis games, we're going to throw in Game Boy games. There's only 3 Game Boy games in April. Lamborghini American Challenge. Lamborghini American Challenge, originally released as Crazy Cars 3, is a 1992 racing video game developed and published by Titus France for the Amiga, Amstrad, CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, MS-DOS, Super NES, Amiga 32, Amiga CD32, and this, the Game Boy version that I'm talking about in the April 94 releases. The game is essentially an upgrade from Titus's previous entry in the Crazy Cars franchise, Crazy Cars 3. It adds a 2-player mode, a few more options, and a jazz fusion soundtrack. It also changes the scoring system and gives the player a possibility to save progress every 5 races, instead of after division challenges only. There are 3 scores here on Wikipedia for the Game Boy version, a 39%, a 67%, and an 86%. So who knows how good it really is? Probably kind of in the middle of the road. Let's look at the prices and some footage of it. Next up on the Game Boy for April 1994, we have Sports Illustrated for Kids, The Ultimate Triple Dare. This game has no Wikipedia page. It looks like it may be on the rare side from prices. I don't know. Other than that, I can't say too much. I'm not going to look up more info on it. We'll have to judge by gameplay footage. And the final Game Boy release for April 1994 is Super Battle Tank War in the Gulf. Well, it was a topical news item, the Gulf War back then, so let's put it in video games. War in the Gulf. Gary Kitchen's Super Battle Tank War in the Gulf is a 1992 tank simulation single-player video game which takes place during Operation Desert Storm. The player controls an M1 Abrams main battle tank for the United Nations. A sequel, Super Battle Tank 2, was released for the Super NES in 1994. Wikipedia only shows a couple scores for the SNES, and they're 50%, 54%, and 67%, saying the Super NES graphics were good, but the game was repetitive. So I'm sure that the Game Boy didn't review any better, probably worse, if the Super NES didn't do very good with this game from a couple year previous PC game. Okay, thanks for watching. That is the first episode of New in the 90s. in the books. Well, not really in the books, but as they say in the books, it's basically on the hard drive, uploaded to YouTube, and signed, sealed, and delivered to you, the good viewers out there in YouTube land. Hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully you subscribe and get a few views on this, and you watch like 5, 10, 15. Hopefully you watch the whole episode. And more episodes will come every couple of weeks, I hope. Thanks for watching, Dragon Chaser Kev. Take care.